All right, guys. So Film Theory put out a video talking about Robert Downey Jr.'s return as Iron Man, it looks like. Or not as Iron Man, as Doctor Doom. But maybe Iron Man, probably a Tony Stark variant. Who knows? We shall see. By the way, I know that they've said that he's playing Victor Von Doom, but like Victor Von Doom could be an Iron Man. He could be a Tony Stark variant, just to be clear. Because again, my whole thing is like there's no way in hell that they don't bring Robert Downey Jr. back and have the character that he's playing connected to Tony Stark in any way, shape, or form. Like that would be really weird. But either way, who cares about that? It looks like this is going to be more so just talking about the fact that he's being paid $100 million, which is fucking insane. And it really does just speak to the fact that Hollywood in general is just spending way too much fucking money on movies. Like, one of the main reasons why movies are considered flops and bombs and whatnot is just because studios are just like casually throwing out $200 million. And it's just like, how and why? And like, it's crazy. And like, people will say like, well, why do you care about the money? Why do you care about that? This is stupid business stuff. And it's like, I understand that reaction, but if you like movies, just like as a concept, if you just like watching movies, then wouldn't you be interested in like understanding why the industry is either thriving or not thriving? And I mean, if you still don't care about that, it's like, guess what? At the end of the day, the studios are going to find the money somewhere, and where they're going to find it is you, because they're going to start raising ticket prices and stuff like that. Like that is the end game of everything, right? Is us, the consumers, ultimately potentially having to pay higher ticket prices in order to justify these costs. So like, that's like the ultimate reason why I'm like, hey, before you do that, before you come for my money, maybe just stop spending as much money on these. And so maybe just stop spending as much money on movies. So that's why when I see Robert Downey Jr., he's getting paid $100 million, and it's like, Jesus fucking Christ. That's why it bothers me. But let's see what a Film Theory has to say.
Marvel is paying upwards of $100 million to bring Robert Downey Jr. back in Avengers Doomsday, and the news has lit the internet on fire. But the question on my mind is, was it worth it?
I will say I'm actually not sure if he's being paid $100 million for Doomsday or for both Doomsday and Secret Wars. My assumption is it's for Doomsday, because I think he was paid like $70 million or something like that for Infinity War and Endgame, and he's not going to take, a $20 million pay cut for Doomsday. So yeah, my guess is that it is $100 million just for Doomsday, and then I assume $100 million plus for Secret Wars, which I assume he'll also be back for that.
Well, we did the research and crunched the numbers, and the answer is gonna surprise you, but not for the reason you might think.
Whoa. Intro. Enticing us
Welcome
with
to
the
Film
intro.
Theory, the show that wants its own cool mask. Can we make that happen? Is that a thing we can do? It's no secret that Marvel's in a bit of a lull right now. Tragedy struck and took one of their rising stars. COVID and the strike shut down the entire industry, and they had several underwhelming movies and disappointing Disney Plus shows back to back. Even Deadpool wasn't shy about making fun of them for this.
Welcome to the MCU, by the way. You're joining at a bit of a low point.
And just looking at our own numbers internally, Marvel content just doesn't perform like it used to.
8 years ago, Film Theory, 14 million views. 3 years ago, Film Theory, There's Blood on Captain America's Hand, 2.8 million views. Deadpool proves the MCU is a simulation, 1.1 million views. Yeah, that's a thing. Yeah, it is kind of crazy that like a Film Theory about a Disney Plus show 3 years ago outperformed a Film Theory about Deadpool and Wolverine 3 months ago. Although, okay, just I don't want to shit on them here, but to be fair, this is also a Film Theory produced in the post Matt Pat era. So I don't know that you can necessarily. I'm not saying that they're wrong. Obviously, Marvel is in a lull, but that is something to take into consideration here.
Too. There was a time where we counted on MCU predictions and analysis as a backbone for our channel, but now I love Marvel and covering their movies, but we have to pick and choose our battles because Marvel burned a lot of their trust with their audience. I actually wasn't planning on doing anything related to Comic-Con until I saw the news of Downey's astronomical payday, but this is just too big for Marvel and Disney and the film industry at large. We had to cover it. Yeah, in hopes of pulling an Uno reverse card to turn their fortunes around, continuing the momentum from Deadpool and Wolverine, Marvel announced that they're replacing Kang the Conqueror as the main villain for their next Avengers movies with the iconic Doctor Doom, played by Iron Man himself, the one and only Robert Downey Jr.
Wow.
And my initial thoughts are, That certainly is a choice. I'd always thought that the clear and obvious pick was Cillian Murphy, and this certainly seems like Feige asked for the guy from Oppenheimer and his assistant misunderstood him.
Let's face it, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing.
Regardless, this is a bold choice for Marvel and Disney, especially considering just how many dump trucks of money they must have backed into RDJ's driveway to make this happen. Reports are saying that it is significantly more than $80 million, just for one guy for 2 movies. So that leads me to the obvious question, will this be worth it? And I don't just mean the money.
So but obviously before he lays out all the data or whatever, I know I went on my whole spiel beforehand, but at the end of the day, I think yes. Because here's the thing. We live in an age now where the movie star is dead, right? Like, you can't just put Tom Cruise in a movie and it's just going to be as successful all of a sudden, right? Because it's like, you put Tom Cruise in a specific movie at a specific point in time, right? Top Gun Maverick, sure, that movie made like over $1 billion, I think. But then he made the latest Mission Impossible movie. That movie kind of did middling numbers. I don't even know. I'm not even sure if it broke even. I don't think that Tom Cruise's Jack Reacher movies were like massive hits either. Will Smith, he's a guy who you put him in a specific movie, right? Bad Boys, those movies are still doing great. But you put him in Gemini Man, Will Smith on his own isn't exactly a box office draw. The thing about Robert Downey Jr. is, you put him in Dr. Dolittle, movie's not going to do too great. But him coming back in Marvel as Tony Stark, that is a proven, easy $1 billion at the box office. I mean, it just is. And you bring him back as Doctor Doom in an Avengers movie, presumably. Again, I'm assuming it's gonna be. I just feel like it has to be related to Tony Stark in some way, right? Whether it be a variant or whatever, or in some other way. There's just no way that Doctor Doom looking like Tony Stark isn't going to be related to the plot in some way. So, for all intents and purposes, Marvel, like MCU audiences, they understand the multiverse, they understand all of that. Like, yes, he's coming back as Doctor Doom, but I do think that the Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark hype, I do think it will carry forward into the hype for this movie. I mean, it's been proven just how much people are talking about it online. So I think at the end of the day, as much as I hate, how much money Marvel is spending on, or Hollywood is spending on movies, at the end of the day, I mean, if Marvel just wants a way to inject adrenaline into their weakened body, yeah, it's worth it. It is a valid play. I mean, it is. But at the end of the day, it's not going to save the MCU. Like, Deadpool and Wolverine is not going to save the MCU. This stunt that they're pulling with Robert Downey Jr. is not going to save the MCU. The only thing that is going to save the MCU and that will sustain it in the future is the other movies, being great and people liking them, right? So, like, Deadpool and Wolverine alone isn't going to save the MCU. It has to be followed up with a good Captain America Brave New World, which is then followed up with a good Thunderbolts, which is then followed up with a good Fantastic Four, I think. Is that the next movie after Thunderbolts? You know what I mean? So we'll see.
Is it worth it to bring RDJ back from the perspective of the fans, for the story that they're trying to tell, and for the amount of money they have to spend to make this happen? That is what I want to answer today, loyal theorists. Was bringing back Robert Downey Jr. for Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars worth it? Or are Marvel truly doomed? Suit up in your favorite armor and throw on your cloaks, chat, as we get to the bottom of this question. Now, the very first thing that should be in the forefront of Marvel's mind when they make a decision like this, and for us when we ask whether or not it was worth it, it's not the money, but how it impacts their fan base. Yeah, the fans are the single most important part of these franchises, so was it worth it to bring back RDJ for the fans? We mentioned at the top of the episode that the MCU has been in a bit of a rut, and both Marvel and Disney as a whole have needed a big PR reset. Like, sometimes it's hard to remember because it seems like a billion years ago, but 2023 was an awful year for Disney. They had flop after flop with Ant-Man Quantumania, Indiana Jones, Haunted Mansion, The Marvels, Wish. It was rough, and that was just in the theaters. There was bad news for Disney Plus, bad news for their hotels and parks, bad news for their corporate structure. They needed something to make us all forget about that and move on. To put it in YouTube terms, they needed an apology video, right? Something to address the concerns and put people's fears at ease, preferably without a ukulele. This announcement of RDJ was their attempt at that, an attempt to shift the conversation. And when you
I mean, I would argue that Deadpool and Wolverine would have been the apology video because they literally apologize in the movie, or at the very least, like, Deadpool literally addresses the problem was with the multiverse saga and whatnot. But I mean, sure, that's nitpick.
You put it hand in hand with Inside Out 2, a genuinely fantastic family movie, and Deadpool and Wolverine, a really solid movie that is hilarious and tugs at your heartstrings, it did the job. On the surface, every part of this decision is fan service. First of all, Doom 100% makes sense as a villain choice. Kang just was not connecting with audiences, let alone all the controversy surrounding his actor, so a switch made sense, and there isn't a better choice than Dr. Doom. Doom is hands down one of Marvel's best villains, and consistently ranks in lists of the top 10 Marvel villains ever, and oftentimes he takes home the gold. He's just a great character. If you don't know, and you wouldn't if you've only...
I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know anything about Doctor Doom. Like, aside from the movies, which I don't know if those are particularly good representations of, like, what the character is, because I've always heard that he's, like, the leader of Latveria or whatever, and that's just, like, never explored in any of the movies.
Only seen Fantastic Four and Fanforstic, Doom is the ruler of his own kingdom, genuinely loves his people and his family, and is a master of science, art, magic, and technology. But he's also arrogant, with an ego and hubris that outshines even Tony Stark. He holds grudges and believes himself to be the best of the best, and ignores good advice just because it wasn't his idea. Like, he's the sort of dude who wants to take over the world because he sincerely thinks that he can make it a better place for everybody, if only he was in charge. He's also the main villain of Secret Wars, the story that they're probably adapting in these new Avengers movies, so sure, slam dunk here. And on top of all of that, fans loved Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. If you want proof, one of my favorite things to do is go and watch audience reactions to big movies, and the cheer Downey got at the end of Endgame was insane in every video. Getting him back into
By the way,
MCU,
I just want to say, I appreciate my movie theater audience and, like, the community where I live, because they don't cheer at Marvel stuff. Like I watched Deadpool and Wolverine, and I think it was getting a good response and whatnot, but nobody was, like, cheering when all the cameos or whatever showed up. Everybody was just silently watching the movie. Like, you heard laughs, right? That's fine. Like, a joke happens, you laugh, that's fine. But nobody was going, woo, woo, which I appreciate. Because, not to hate on the practice too much, because, I mean, it is what it is. That's what these movies are. But a little distracting when you're wooing over the dialogue.
was always going to be a big card that Marvel could play to renew interest with the fans, and on the surface, I think it was a good call. But if you dig just a little bit deeper, reactions to this news has been surprisingly mixed. Like, sure,
Okay, let's be real here. The people complaining on Twitter because they want like a fucking they want, what is it, a Romanian actor playing Doctor Doom. I'm not trying to discredit that concern, even though I personally don't really care that much about like super hyper accurate castings down to fucking ethnicity. I don't really care about that. I understand all you guys that are out there, but you guys also need to understand that you make up like maybe 1% of the audience that watches Marvel movies. The reality is that anybody in the general audience that hears that Robert Downey Jr. is coming back to Marvel is going to immediately get excited. And that just is the reality, right? When they put out a trailer and they see Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom, especially if the trailer connects it to Iron Man in some way, even in some kind of multiversal capacity, general audiences are going to be excited. Don't get me wrong, y'all are loud on Twitter. I recognize that. Y'all are loud on Twitter. You're getting a bunch of likes, but I do think that you're living in a bubble. I could be wrong about that, but the reality, the super overarching reality is that most people that watch Marvel movies don't actually know that much about Doctor Doom, because Doctor Doom has only been in like 2 movies that didn't do very well. He's a part of a comic book franchise. He's big in comics, but nobody really reads comic books. So like the reality is that for general movie-going audiences, this is going to be like their first proper introduction to Doctor Doom. At the very least, assuming it's done well, it's going to be the first Doctor Doom that they like super like. So I understand what he's about to bring up, but I don't really think it's that relevant in the grand scheme of things.
Initial reaction was wildly positive. The room at Comic-Con went absolutely ballistic when they announced it. There's a subset of fans out there that love this news, and that's awesome for them. But there are others that don't. I'm pretty tapped into the filmmaking side of YouTube, and Robert Downey Jr. has been more polarizing than I expected, with a lot of people whose opinions I really respect. Some people love the idea, like Dan Murrell and New Rockstars.
This could be the change, the shakeup that the MCU needs. Color me excited.
He is perfect for this version of Doom.
While others, like Jeremy Jahns, are way more skeptical.
But I can't help but see Marvel Studios bringing Robert Downey Jr. back into the MCU is them kind of admitting that they don't know how to fix it.
And others, like Nando V Movies, are just confused. As for me, well,
the Fun 99 menu. 5 items, always $1.99 each. Live free, eat Sonic.
At Peacock, data scientists have made a groundbreaking discovery. People love Friday night.
On the face,
well, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, is it desperate? Is it like Jeremy Jahns admitting, or as Jeremy Jahns kind of said there, where they're like admitting that, yeah, we're this multiverse shit, and we don't know what the fuck we're doing here. Yes, all of those things are true, but that doesn't mean that it's not That doesn't mean that it's not a smart move, and that doesn't mean it can't work, and that doesn't mean it can't work well. Even if you hate the idea of this, I feel like you have to be a little bit dishonest if you don't see that there are very potentially interesting stories to be told about a Tony Stark variant turning evil. like that on it, like, take away the Doctor Doom aspect of it, which I know taking away the Doctor Doom aspect is what's like annoying you guys, right? And I understand that, but just take that on its surface, right? A variant of Tony Stark being evil. That is interesting. I mean, it just is. Or it's potentially interesting. So yes, it is desperate, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. A lot of good things can come out of desperation.
Of it, I don't love this decision, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Marvel's really needed a shot in the arm, and I'm not sure this is what I would have done to do it, but if it works, it's really going to work, and I can't fault them for that. But the real risk that they're running with fans here is going to be what this is going to do to Doom, the character. This version of Doom is without a doubt going to be what the average moviegoer thinks of when they hear Dr. Doom for years. They have one of the biggest movie stars on the planet who previously played one of their biggest characters hopping into this role. How could anyone look at Doom and not think about Downey after this? But the flip side of that is that because of the wide reach of these films, they have a massive influence over the perception of these characters throughout all of pop culture, including the comics. Like, Wolverine was popular in the 80s and 90s. Arguably, he was the most popular X-Man. But after the movies blew up, his characterization and appearance changed, leaning way more on the tall, dark, and handsome Hugh Jackman version of the character instead of the Canadian fur gremlin from the comics. The same thing goes for Iron Man, Spider-Man, Captain America.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but it's also like these are all sad realities for comic book fans. But the reality outside of that is that the vast majority of Marvel fans, which are Marvel movie fans, don't care about any of this. And that's just the reality. So, I mean, I get it. I get people that are going to be upset about stuff like this, but, you know.
The Hulk, Thor, Thanos, Loki, all of these characters changed to match the little differences from the movies. Changed costumes, tweaked origin stories, vibe shifts. But maybe the biggest example of the films influencing the comics here, though, is the Guardians of the Galaxy. In the comics, the version of the team that we all know with Peter Quill and Rocket and Groot and all of the others, they actually only got together in 2008 as a way to tackle cosmic threats before they became a huge problem. It was played pretty straight. The characters had uniforms, they were facing serious threats, that sort of thing. But after the MCU movie came out, all of a sudden the team looked identical to the movies, with the same members wearing the same costumes. They leaned more into fun adventures and comedy.
Hold on one moment, guys. All right, guys. So, I'm just gonna be real with you. There was straight up a branch that fell on my roof, so I'm sweaty. It's nighttime now, like hours have passed. I've just been dealing with that. But I'm going to finish this video because this is a responsibility that I have put on myself to make YouTube videos, because I have a far-fetched dream that will almost certainly not come to fruition, but I'm doing it anyways because that's just how these things work, don't they? Let's continue.
And 80s nostalgia. For better or for worse, the MCU changed the Guardians of the Galaxy forever. So if Downey plays Doom as a character way different from the one from the comics, something closer to Tony Stark than Victor Von Doom, that's going to truly change this character's perception by the mainstream, and hardcore fans probably aren't going to like that.
Listen, like I was saying before, it's just that it just doesn't really matter all that much. At least, to be clear, when we're talking about a viable strategy by Marvel. It just won't matter, and I'm just being for real, no cap. You know what I mean?
And it's also gonna probably be potentially really confusing for the
probably
casual
won't
fan.
be.
They may look at Downey's Doom and think, wait, why is Iron Man green and suddenly bad now? And what if they want to bring Doom back in the future with a different actor? I do not envy the job that they're gonna have to do. That is just gonna be an even bigger headache, unless they're comfortable.
I mean, that's all true, right? Like, if they ever wanted to, like, flip it around and do like a comic accurate Doom, it does have the potential of being weird, for sure.
Or more for Downey every time he comes back for a movie, which is just not sustainable. And
Nope.
so now, with all of that in mind, we have to ask, from the fans' perspective, was this worth it for Marvel? At this point, it's hard to say. In the short term, yes, absolutely this will be worth it. Alongside the success of Deadpool and Wolverine, this casting decision instantly changed the conversation around Avengers 5 and the MCU. But in the long term, a lot has to work for this to go well, including the story of this character, which brings me to the next point. Is this worth it for the story, for the narrative? Was it worth it to change the story to star Dr. Doom?
I mean, the reality is that what even was the fucking story that they were telling? I don't think even Kevin Feige knows what story they were telling in regards to the multiverse saga. I don't think even they had a good grasp on where exactly it was all going to end up, what exactly Kang was going to do. So to me, that's like it's like a neutral thing of like, I don't think they even had a plan beforehand, and now they kind of sort of probably have a plan. So I would say yes. I would probably just answer that question as yes.
Doom. So the first hurdle they need to clear here is whether or not there's enough time to build up Doom as the big bad for this story. At first, you might think the answer is no. I mean, Thanos was teased for years before he became the main villain for the Avengers. How are they going to make that work for Doom in just one movie? Well, counterpoint, did they really build up Thanos for years? Think about it.
I was actually just about to say this. They really didn't.
He was in a post-credits scene in The Avengers where he smiled. There was like a 2-minute scene in Guardians that everyone forgets about. And then like, I guess Gamora and Nebula mention him sometimes. And he had one line in the Age of Ultron post-credits scene. Most of the real build-up for the Infinity Saga was for the Infinity Stones.
That's true.
Thanos himself didn't really become a character until Infinity War, and no one thinks that that didn't work. So applying that to Doom in the Multiverse Saga, well, Marvel certainly has been building up the multiverse, for better or for worse, and Doom might have some screen time in Fantastic Four First Steps. And even if he doesn't, this specific team of producers, writers, and directors have made quote-unquote new villains like this work in the past. Plus, the story that they're building up to here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that that's really going to be much of an issue, to be honest with you, just for the reasons that he laid out.
Secret Wars? Like I mentioned earlier, its main villain is Doom, and sees him ascending to godhood as he salvages parts of different universes to make a new universe called Battleworld. Honestly, given everything that they've been building up in the Multiverse Saga, that sounds like the perfect setup for this upcoming movie. They could take bits and pieces from the MCU, the Fox-Men, the Sony Spider-Man movies, and all of their old obscure Marvel films and make an ultimate crossover. So yeah, the switch to Doom here makes sense. But the real question here for our narrative concerns comes down to what type of Doom they're going to do. See, the Victor Von Doom from the comics is a really unique character in that we almost never see his face. He was horribly scarred in an accident and prefers to stay inside his suit of armor, Darth Vader style. This is absolutely a direction Marvel could go with here, casting RDJ in a glorified voice role like The Mandalorian and keeping the character entirely separate from everything else Downey did in the MCU. They could keep him under that mask. But let's be...
Yeah, I mean, like, they could do that, maybe they should do that, but, like, at the end of the day, like, if you're casting Robert Downey Jr., you're not giving him a horribly scarred face. I mean, you're just not. Unless a part of all of this comes with Downey is also playing other Iron Man variants. Like, maybe we get, like, an Iron Man variant that looks like Robert Downey Jr. fighting Doctor Doom. I mean, that unless that's all a part of it, because there's just no way that they're not having Robert Downey Jr. on screen for like a good amount of the runtime.
Real, there's no way they're doing this. They did not pay $100 million or more for a name on a poster. They want Downey and his face in this movie for as long as they can have him. No, the second and far more likely option is that Doctor Doom is going to be showing his face and often, and that he's gonna look like RDJ. Even more straightforwardly, he could just be a variant of Tony Stark, but evil. Someone who wanted to put a suit of armor around the world and succeeded, or went down a darker path to make it happen. A lot of smart people here on YouTube have already connected those dots and thrown out that idea, and, well, I'm mixed on it. While
It's about to drop.
Suit of armor around the world.
it would be very inaccurate for the comics, and as we've already said, this interpretation of Doom is going to be what most people associate with the character for a long time, I also have to admit that there's a lot of incredible story potential here. Having
what I
this
said
villain
earlier,
literally
before
wearing
the
face
disaster
of
struck.
the greatest hero of the MCU, right off the bat, that is storytelling gold. But also consider this. How would Spider-Man react seeing his mentor and hero twisted into an evil
Mr.
dictator?
Stark,
How
why
would
are
this
you
Tony
evil now,
Doom
Mr.
react to
Stark?
seeing this bright-eyed spider kid light up seeing him and then get devastated when he realizes the dark path he went down? And that's to say nothing of other characters like Banner or Thor, or hell, even Happy Hogan react to seeing their longtime friend and ally become the worst villain in the multiverse. There's also a lot of potential for meta storytelling here, with the newer heroes of the MCU like Shang-Chi, Miss Marvel and Moon Knight battling an incarnation of the old MCU, someone who represents the first few phases that is currently a shadow looming over their head. Same thing with multiversal characters from older, pre-MCU movies like Wolverine, Tobey Spider-Man, and Blade. They also get the opportunity to go head-to-head against the same representation of the MCU that made their movies obsolete. All of that is only possible by having an actor like RDJ take this role because of the history that he has with this brand, and we know for a fact that it can be very effective. We saw a similar, albeit much less serious example of this in Deadpool and Wolverine. Here, Chris Evans shows up, and we're initially led to believe that he's a multiversal variant of Marvel's Boy Scout Captain America, only to reveal him to be the foul-mouthed womanizer Johnny Storm. That's about as far away from Steve Rogers as you can get, and I don't know about you, but Evans saying "Flame on" got one of the biggest reactions in my theater because it was so different than what we expected. Not to mention the rant full of colorful language he goes on at the end of the movie. All of that only worked because of the context of Chris Evans' previous role as Captain America. The same thing that RDJ's Doom can tap into here with dramatic
Yeah, I mean, I'm
stakes.
kind of
So,
silent
will this
because
be
I just
worth
kind
it
of
from a
agree with
narrative
everything
perspective?
that he's saying
Obviously, they have to pull it off. They have to make it good, but yeah, it could well be worth it because of the sheer amount of unique possibilities RDJ can bring to this character. And who's to say they can't recast Doom later to explore more stories? For this moment and this story, yes, it is worth it to drop all of this cash. Which leads us to our final point, all about the Benjamins. Was it worth it to pay this enormous price tag to bring RDJ back to the MCU? Yeah, this might seem like a weird thing to save until last, but while the fan and the story perspective probably have the biggest impact on Marvel, this has the biggest impact on the worth of it for Disney. Just so we're 100% on the same page here, the official information we have for Downey's paycheck is that it will be, quote, significantly more than the $80 million being paid to the Russo brothers to return to direct these two movies, on top of what is likely a hefty back end for both films. If you don't know, a back end deal in Hollywood basically means that an actor or director or whatever will take home a percentage of what...
You know, I feel like... So basically, before we even factor in the actual production budget of the movie, this is going to be a movie that just based on the salary of the director and the or the directors and the actors, and the actor in Robert Downey Jr., my apologies. This is going to be a movie that has a rough budget of $180 million. Before we get into production, before we get into the salaries of all the other actors, because are you really bringing back Tobey Maguire and Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds Deadpool and, you know, Shang-Chi and Miss Marvel and Tom Holland Spider-Man? Like, are we bringing all of these guys back into this one movie? Before you even factor in all of that, you're paying we're already at $180 million. Avengers Secret Wars or Avengers Doomsday is going to be like it's almost a done deal at this point. I feel like that Avengers Doomsday is going to be the most expensive movie of all time, and Avengers Secret Wars is going to then be the most expensive movie of all time. But if you do it right, yeah, I could still see it making a profit. I mean, come on, like, you know, if you build it right, I mean, I definitely could see Avengers Doomsday cracking the $2 billion mark for like almost for sure. And if you have an Avengers Secret, and if let's just say that's good, right? Like Infinity War was good, and then it led into Avengers Endgame. If Avengers Doomsday is great and it leaves us with that same feeling of like, oh my god, I can't believe we have to wait a year for Avengers Avengers Secret Wars. I mean, you make an Avengers Secret Wars that includes, you know, all the Fox X-Men characters. That includes all the ancillary Marvel characters. That includes everybody that was in the first 3 phases. That includes all your new characters, all your new heroes. I mean, that that's a movie that's going to make a lot of money, you know? Like, it just is, even if it's bad. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, the answer just has to be yes. I do think it's worth it to pay all this money.
The movie makes at the box office. Typically, only big names can make deals like this, since it will likely net them more money than an upfront paycheck. This is actually where Robert Downey Jr. made a lot of his money as Iron Man.
Hold on one moment. Food now, leave me alone.
There are rumors that on top of his $75 million salary for Avengers Endgame, Downey negotiated a back-end deal that netted him another $55 million. While these are just rumors, honestly, that sounds about right for the amount of star power and importance Downey had for the MCU franchise at that point. It also makes the idea that he's getting upwards of $100 million for Doomsday and Secret Wars absolutely realistic. Also, it's just mind-blowing to me. There are really good movies made for less money than they're paying this guy. That is just, it's insane.
Yeah.
Anyway, so with all of that in mind, is that huge paycheck worth just one Robert Downey Jr. for 2 movies? Well, from a box office perspective, abso-frickin-lutely. If there's one thing Marvel's great at, it's mining the nostalgia of their fans and making fun movies out of it. Just look at their biggest movies since Endgame. Hype for Multiverse of Madness lent on cameos and fan casting that people wanted for ages, like Professor X and Mr. Fantastic. No Way Home absolutely blew up because they brought back the Maguire and Garfield Spideys and their villains, letting them all interact and giving us a glimpse into these worlds.
I mean, it is what it is. And I've been talking a lot about how, about how we can talk about like comic book accuracy and hardcore fans, and it doesn't really matter because the general audiences are going to speak. But this is a point where I will say that it does sadden me that this is just a reality. Because, like, in my opinion, like, actually, like, Multiverse of Madness more than most people, but, like, No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine are, like, far from the best MCU movies since Endgame. Like, it's not even close to me. Like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is, like, easily the best one. But people will respond to what they respond to. And it just is what it is.
Worlds after their movies ended, and of course, Deadpool and Wolverine is just a giant love letter to the Fox X-Men movies, built off the nostalgia of bringing back Hugh Jackman as Logan. Clearly, putting these characters in new, exciting, and different stories sells. That, on top of the love that Downey has, and whatever Avengers, X-Men, Spider-Man, and Fantastic Four characters are going to show up in these movies, it's worth that price tag easy. Both Doomsday and Secret Wars are going to easily top $2 billion at the box office, and if they don't, Marvel has a bigger problem than casting. But this isn't the whole story.
Ooh.
We are Transformers!
What is the whole story?
An incredible cast to be voicing
Right here, right now, we're only talking about the movies. Don't get me wrong, that's an important part of this franchise, but they're not the whole story. See, decisions like this are important to Disney as an entire business. Movies make up a shockingly small slice of the Disney pie when it comes to how they make their money. In one of their most recent earnings reports, Disney made just $1.63 billion from what it calls content sales and licensing. That's basically the movies it puts out in theaters, DVD and Blu-ray sales, digital video rentals, video on demand, that sort of thing. To be entirely fair, this was after a slow year with a lot of flops, but if you look at this in comparison with other parts of their business, it's wild to see the difference. Just take a look at their experiences segment. That's stuff like their theme parks and their merchandise. Damn. During this same period, Experiences made a whopping $9.13 billion, almost 40% of all of the money the company made. That right there, that's what Disney...
That's crazy. I knew that like parks were like a massive part of their business, but I didn't realize it was like the majority of their revenue.
Really cares about because it's their bread and butter. This is where the real money from the movies gets made and why the mouse cares so much about gathering IP like a dragon hoarding gold. But more importantly, keeping these IP healthy and important, relevant to pop culture is a huge part of how the Disney Experiences division makes their money. It's why they wanted Marvel to begin with. See, back in the day, Disney always had good franchises that they could market to families, young girls, and teenage girls, thanks to stuff like Pixar, Walt Disney Animation, Animation, the Disney Princesses, and Disney Channel. They bought Marvel and Star Wars to lock down the young and teenage boy demographics because they already had pre-built-in audiences with decades of name recognition. And thanks to the parks and merch, the return on this investment for these IP has been huge. In 2024, Disney reported that they'd made $13.2 billion in profit from the Marvel.
Holy shit. This is crazy.
IP. That means that...
I mean, So, when we talk about the fact that, like, all of these, like, Star Wars shows are flopping and the Acolyte isn't getting views and whatnot, I guess, and I don't know, listen, I'm not a businessman, I can't do all this math in my head. Is it the case that at the end of the day, I mean, obviously it's not good that Lucasfilm is, like, incapable of making a movie and that, the Acolyte didn't get high viewership, but is it like one of those things where, like, at the end of the day, Star Wars is still technically a healthy brand and Marvel is still a healthy brand even though a bunch of their movies have been flopping? I wonder what the overall answer to that is at the end of the day.
After accounting for the cost of making all of the movies and manufacturing the merch and building the multiple $500 million Avengers Campus parks, they have made over $13 billion. Now, just having Doctor Doom be the villain in these next two movies would absolutely jumpstart this character in the merch and in the parks. Both Ultron and Thanos saw huge pushes after their villain debuts in the MCU. Just a couple examples off the top of my head. Thanos and his goons were the bad guys in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, and he was also dancing his way through an entire Fortnite season, while Ultron was the main villain in Marvel vs.
There was also an episode of Abbott Elementary where there was a child that dressed up like Thanos and started terrorizing the school. I watched that recently.
Capcom Infinite. I actually went to E3 2017 where they had a big booth for this game and a life-size Ultron statue that I thought was just so cool. An even more recent and probably better example here is Deadpool and Wolverine. Both of these characters have been introduced as cast members that walk around the Avengers Campus parks, host events, and that you can meet and take pictures with the characterizations from these movies.
Oh, you know how long I've been waiting for this. I'm about to make a name for myself, right? Yeah!
Casting RDJ as Doom not
a
only
little
gives
cringe,
him
but,
the awareness
it is
boost
what
of
it is.
being the main villain in a pair of Avengers movies, but also instantly adds the charisma Downey has to that character. He's basically pre-packaged for all forms of other media to adapt. A perfect face for a shirt, a mug, a poster, and a cast member that can be transplanted into the parks. So, to answer the question at the top of this theory, at the heart of this discussion, was bringing back Robert Downey Jr. worth it? Yes. There's no doubt that this is going to be a risky move for Marvel and Disney, but the potential return on investment in terms of the narrative, the character, and the money spent to make this is the right decision for them to make right now. But Disney, Marvel, listen to me, sit down. You have to make sure you do this right. You have to respect this character and the fans who love him, or this will blow up in your face. And if you want proof of that, all you have to do is look at Star Wars. This is a brand that you haven't been treating as well as you should have. And what have the results been? Unenthusiastic fans, disappointing shows.
The reality is that it's not so much as respecting the brand as much as it is just making good content. Listen, we have listened to like hardcore Marvel fans for years cry about the MCU, right? We've heard them crying about how the Mandarin was bad in Iron Man 3 because he wasn't actually the Mandarin. We've heard about how Age of Ultron wasn't the actual Age of Ultron adaptation from the comics. It was more like a week of Ultron. It was more like a 48 hours of Ultron. You just talked about how, like he talked about earlier in the video, about how the Guardians of the Galaxy are completely different from how they were in the comic books. Like, at the end of the day, it's not so much that Lucasfilm has been disrespecting Star Wars. It's more so that they just haven't been making good content. I mean, that's the ultimate thing, right? Because, like, what's that Star Wars theory guy? I remember he doesn't like Andor. I don't remember exactly why, but I think it's because he doesn't think it's, like, true Star Wars or whatever, but general audiences don't give a fuck. Andor is just an incredible show. Like, we don't care that you're like, but in the extended universe, right? The what Disney should have adapted during this period of time, and or would be doing this or that. Like, nobody cares about that. Nobody gives a single iota of a shit about that. Oh, most people are just like, oh, that's a good show. And most people are like, oh, The Acolyte was just kind of boring and uninteresting. Most people don't care that they like, oh, they disrespected the Jedi, even though they really didn't, in my opinion. I don't think they painted the Jedi as a bad guy, but that's like the narrative. Most people don't care about that. It just wasn't a good show. So, I get it. Film theory is like pandering to the fans that are like most likely going to be the ones watching this video, but I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth is that you guys don't really matter that much at the end of the day. By the way, I say that for myself as well. Right? Like, at the end of the day, I think that the multiversal cameo porn stuff that we've seen in, like, No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine isn't great. And at the end of the day has led to the Tom Holland trilogy not really feeling all that satisfying. And the fact that Spider-Man 4, Tom Holland's Spider-Man 4, there's like rumors now that they're going to go into a multiverse direction with it, where they're going to bring back Tobey and Andrew. I think that sucks. But at the end of the day, I understand that a Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield less Spider-Man 4 that is a street-level story with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, that's the movie that I want. But I recognize that that movie is going to make less money than another team up with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. And that just is what it is.
And box office bombs. Parks that aren't packed and themed hotels that fail so hard they have to shut down. That is what happens when you don't put thought into how you make these decisions. And if you do the same here with this incredibly important piece of Marvel history, well, it'll be your doom. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.
But I mean, yeah, overall, I largely agree with what he has to say. For the most part. I think that it is a worthwhile risk to take. And you know what I'll say as well? You know what would have been lazier? You know what would have been even more of a cash grab? And you know what probably would have had more or less the same effect as far as general audience excitement? It's just bringing back Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. You know, whether it be bringing him back from the dead or bringing him back as like just an Iron Man variant. So this is more interesting than that, at least. So, anyways, let me know what you think in the comments down below. And I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.